If you know much about me, you know I'm pretty into the arts. I like to draw, I like to paint. Occasionally I animate, read a lot of books, especially fantasy ones. One of the arts that I participate in that you may not have heard me talk about very much is constructing languages. I first started to make up languages when I was about 9 years old. Prior to that, I had been really into codes and ciphers. I liked the idea of knowing lots of languages. One of our neighbors had started teaching us a little bit of French. I didn't really know much about French or any other language at that time. I was really into fantasy stories where there was a map in the front of the book, or somewhere in the book. As I have done with lots of other sorts of artistic pursuits, I saw what someone else was doing and I thought, I want to do something kind of like that, but make it mine, do my version. So I started to try and come up with a fantasy story, and to do that I needed a fantasy setting. And what better way to invent a fantasy setting than to draw a picture of a map and include mountain ranges and water features and roads and city locations. Once I had put all these things on the map, I began to label them. And I gave the cities names and the rivers names, and then I named one of the mountains, and then I was naming the other mountain or mountain range, and I thought, if I make the end of this name the same as the end of this other name, then that part of the word could mean mountain in this made-up world. And I had kind of a moment where that suddenly branched out in my mind to the realization that I could make up a whole language. Like, what's stopping me? Really? What's stopping me from just, if I can make up one word, if I can make up the word for hill for this map, why not make up all the words for the map and for everything else while I'm at it? And pretty much immediately, I mean, by the end of the day, I started making a list of new words for my own language. This seemed, at the time, an entirely 100% novel idea. I thought no one else in the world ever had this idea. I was the first one. It was my idea, mine. No one else did it. It was my special hobby. And I would always be the best at it because I didn't know anyone else who did it. On top of that, what better way to give an incredible level of depth to my made-up place? So I went to work on what is this place? What is the culture of the people that live there? How does the language connect to the culture? All these ideas. As time went on and the internet opened doors for me, I discovered the Conlang listserv, the brown.edu listserv, which is still out there going on to this day. This was back in the 90s. And that was really a strange combination of emotions and experiences for me, because first of all, wow, there are a few other people out there in the world that do this. I'm not the only one. How cool is that? Also, they all communicate with each other, and I can read what they're saying and see what's up. The hard part about it was, number one, okay, I'm not 100% original. Which was also kind of a good thing, because I felt like I had a connection to these other people that I'd never met. But also a lot of them had linguistics classes, and they were a little bit older than me, or a lot older than me, depending on which Conlanger we're talking about. most of the people on that list were perfectly nice, sharing ideas, telling about their projects, presenting translation challenges. There were a few people who were very, very critical, and they would call people out for misusing the International Phonetic Alphabet, for example, or XAMPA, which is the easier to use computer equivalent. They would call people out for doing things that wouldn't occur in natural languages. They would just, you know how people are on the internet. They would see something they didn't agree with, they would jump on it, they would argue about it, flame wars would ensue, and all those things were really intimidating to me. And as a result, I don't think I ever once made a post to the listserv, but I followed it, I read it. And I learned a lot about linguistics and about the possibilities that exist out there. Another thing that was a big discovery for me was Zompist.com, Mark Rosenfelder's Metaverse. That is still alive and well. You should check it out. And Jeffrey Henning's Langmaker website, which is no longer with us, unfortunately, which carried the Babel Text project, a huge collection of the story of the Tower of Babel, or Babel, however you want to pronounce that, translated into all different Conlangs and some natural languages as well. Also, eventually I read a linguistics textbook, which was also full of information. And all those different things, and all those different things that I learned from those different things influenced me to improve my constructed language over the years, and I did some fairly substantial revisions of that language. Number one, the orthography. The way I wrote it was initially so inconsistent. I was basically just sounding things out using the habits of the English language paired with some things I learned about the way French is written, and it was just a mess. It was inconsistent, highly inconsistent. So I went through and just changed the Romanized version of how the language is written. And that was a huge project, because by then I had thousands of words. And so I just went through, one by one, updated the orthography. That took a long time. Another change was some, structural grammar changes, as I learned the possibilities of ways grammar can work, and also came to the realization that I could be free from rules that we followed in English. I changed that language. So that was the language that I call Smitho, which was theoretically contracted from the name Striomistithos, which is the language of Dithos. That language has mostly fallen out of use. I've worked on a lot of other languages since then, gone through some similar changes and revisions and stuff like that, and learned a lot. And so now I'm working on a couple of languages that are much different from that first one. And I guess I'll do a separate video where I talk about each of those languages in more detail. I would love to hear from more Conlangers about how you first began to Conlang, how you first discovered that it was a possibility, how you first discovered that there were other human beings that engaged in this strange, wondrous, and often tedious hobby. And, yeah. Please, tell me your Conlang beginning story, your Conlang origin story. How do you like my closet decor? What was it called?